Hey, weird question. Have you watched porn? Let's be honest, most of you have. 1 in 3 women watches porn at least once a week, and 70% of men 18 to 24 visit a porn site at least once a month. Even though porn is so widely consumed, it's also widely stigmatized, and maybe it shouldn't be. I wanted to give a voice to this misunderstood world and talk about porn star Alix Lynx. With over 250 million views and hundreds of videos, Alix Lynx is one of the most prolific porn stars ever. We'll learn how she started her porn career, how she makes money, and what she sees as her future. I'm Samuel Donner. This is An Unconventional Life, a show about people that have escaped the 9 to 5.
Okay, let's go way back to Alix's childhood.
I grew up in a really tiny town in upstate New York. I was always getting A's, the teachers loved me, I was in all the extracurricular activities. My mom always had me doing something. We had a pretty strained relationship always. My parents were like fighting over money and like that was always an issue. And like back then I didn't know because my mom hid it, but my dad was an alcoholic. I had no idea. I always just sensed something was off in my house, but I just didn't know. I was kind of put on the back burner almost.
Alix didn't have much support from her family unit. She would have to find another support system. And that support system was herself. In her early teens, she was faced with a choice. She was confronted with a lifestyle that was in stark contrast to her own.
I came across a documentary, right? And it was a documentary on porn. And they were profiling like Jenna Jameson or someone like that. And I just remember watching it. I remember thinking like, wow, like how cool is that a woman can take control of her own career and like build something on something so taboo. And as I grew older, rebellious teenager, I'm like 14, 15.
Like, what
maybe
is
older.
This whole world that has been like...
That's been shunned from my household. Why is this so taboo? Because when you tell me not to do things, like, and I'm that age, too. I'm going to look and I'm going to figure it out.
This interest grew and grew until she just had to tell someone. If she couldn't act on that fantasy, she could at least tell someone about her interest in adult entertainment.
You know, my first boyfriend, lost my virginity to my first boyfriend in high school when I was 16, and I never like slept around or anything like that. But I just remember one day I was like at his house and I was looking at his wall and there was like this poster of this like woman with like, I don't know, I think it was like a Playboy poster or something. Yeah. And I just remember seeing that and I was like, I'm gonna do that one day. And he looked at me and he's like, well, if you do, I'm gonna break up with you. I'm like, okay. But I just still knew it would just keep coming back. I just have known since, I guess, day one that I wanted more from life. And I was always well aware that we get one.
Alix knew that she wanted to take control over her life, but she really didn't have the freedom to do that when she was living at home. But that all changed when she started going to college and really had the freedom to experiment with who she was and what she wanted to be. And I think there was one experience, one choice that would end up shaping the rest of her life. It all started with a college job.
So I worked at the information desk in school, right? I sat there and I helped customers. They would come up, I give them info about the school. I sold stamps. It was a sweet job. I could do my homework. And then I got home one night. I was still living with my parents and someone messaged me on AOL Instant Messenger, if you remember that. This random screen name. I had no idea who it was. And they're like, hey, you're really cute. I saw you today at the info desk. I'm like, who the hell is this? And he was like, oh, you don't know me, but my name's Brian. I just think you're really cute and I have kind of a weird question for you. I'll pay you if you send me a nude, like a naked picture. And I was like, how much? And he's like, I don't know, a few hundred. And I'm like, make it a little bit more. I think he gave me like $700. Basically, I negotiated, right? And I was like, and it's going to be
communication skills.
It's going to be topless. It's not going to be nude. He's like, okay. So I was like, fuck, am I about to send this guy a nude? I'm never going to hear from him again. Like a talk. Because even back then I knew. I was like, my mom always told me, like, if you do anything, assume it's going to be public. And sure enough, next day comes over, hands me an envelope. There's $700 cash. And I probably had never seen that much money in my life. And I'm like, alrighty then. Like, that was so easy. Yeah. Like, and how stupid. He just paid me how much for like a, but then in my head I was like, no, not really. Like, that's valuable, you know? I was like, that's really valuable. Like, yeah. I just, you know, so in my head I was
realized the value of your body and yourself.
Yes.
Did you see the connection between what you had idolized earlier and what you were doing then?
Yeah. I saw it.
Alix had taken control over her body, which previously had been controlled by the social stigmas of her small town. Alix felt empowered. She felt like she was finally free. This one act seemingly opened up the floodgates for her to explore her body, her sexuality, and herself. But this wouldn't be an isolated opportunity. The next opportunity actually opened up when she was working her other job at a gas station with her friend.
And she texted me and she's like, Harold just came in, and Harold was like this older man. He was gross, but he was a regular, you know, so we saw him often. She texted me, she's like, I have to tell you something. I'm like, okay, call me. So she calls me, she's like, Harold just came in here and asked me the weirdest question and left and told me to think about it. I'm like, well, what? Tell me. And she's like, he told me that he really, and God knows how they got into this conversation, but she's like, he told me he really loves panties. Like, he loves women's panties. And if I gave him some of mine, he would pay me and he would give me a Victoria's Secret gift card to buy more. And I'm like, you don't say. Because I was like, oh, I'm down for this. We went to like the dollar store and just grabbed all these like panties and put them in a bag, and she did the same. And like a few days later, he came to the gas station. We were both working. We handed him the bag, and then he handed us the money. I think he gave us like $400 each and a gift card to Victoria's Secret for like $100 each.
Oh my God.
And I was young again, and I
Were you
hadn't.
like, why is this happening? Why does he want this?
I remember. So first of all, we were really happy. We're like, holy shit, this is the jackpot. Like, we don't have to work. We can just do this. And like, I remember one night, and this is like the most ratchet thing, and I even knew it back then, but I was laughing so hard. So we met him in a Walmart parking lot, like at midnight one night, for like a big drop off, and but it was like bags of panties. And I distinctly remember in my head, I was like, we're at the motherfucking Walmart parking lot right now. This is the most redneck
Trash bags full of panties.
We did the like exchange, and then I would hop in my car. I had a Corolla at the time. I would whip out of there, like peel out in case, because I was like, God, what if he chases us? So I would just like peel out, and we would just cackle. We're like, oh my God, this is crazy. I cannot believe this is our
Sounds
life.
like a drug deal or something.
Literally.
Drug bust.
Literally, that's how I felt. I was like, this is how like drug dealers must feel. Like, wow, this is like, I'm like a hustler. And like, I knew how to hustle, and I always loved it. I got a rush. That's what it was. Every time I sold something, every time I would just get a rush. And when I sold the panties and made that much in the photos,
Same rush.
Bing, I was like, all right, well, I like this.
Alix realized that this brand of hustling is really what piqued her interest. But as she neared graduation, she felt the pull of those societal obligations, of that small town mindset. So she reluctantly gave up her shenanigans with Panty Harold and looked for a real job and a real life. She found a nice boyfriend, moved to the city, started doing her MBA online, and sent her resume out absolutely everywhere. And soon enough, she got a PR job, but she realized that wasn't quite as fun as panty hustling with Harold.
How does somebody do this for 40 years plus? You're gonna drive to an office, you're gonna sit in an office all day, then you're gonna drive back, and I hated it.
Yeah.
I hated it so much.
Alix was working hard and actually finding success. She was promoted a few times to the point where she was 22 and was an account executive. But then she got back from vacation and got some bad news.
I had a voicemail from my boss to call her, so I called her. She basically told me that because we lost clients, like I couldn't work there anymore, like I had to be laid off. I freaked out.
Yeah, I know, I can imagine, because like it seems like a lot of your like identity is tied to your work ethic.
Yes.
And then like
Still
to
is,
someone, someone to say like, hey, that wasn't good enough.
Yeah, that's how I felt, and I felt so terrible about myself, but then I was like, well, it is what it is.
The 9-to-5 was not working for Alix, and it didn't seem she had many other options. Sure, she had been doing some panty hustling with Harold, but that wasn't a viable long-term career. She still had no stable way to enter into adult entertainment, the industry that she had idolized as a kid. That was until one of her friends started talking to her at a party.
He's like, yo, I gotta tell you something. I'm like, what? He's being all secretive. I'm like, well, what's your deal?
Whispering.
Yeah. And then he's like, oh my God, you have no idea. Like, I just came across this dope site called My Free Cams. But man, these chicks just sit around. They're like in their underwear and they're making so much money. And he's telling me this just to tell me, but in my head, it's like a little bell is going off. I'm like, you don't
what is this?
say. And I went home that night and I checked it out and I was like, wow, like this looks cool. I could do this. Took a little bit of back and forth because I was like, I have to like be naked on the internet and like.
What was holding you back? Because you had done
certain things like that before.
Yeah.
With Panty Harold and the AOL Messenger guy. So like, what was it about this what was giving you hesitation?
That people would know. My mom always said, whatever you do, like, just assume that it can be publicly posted. And I knew, I was like, well, if I do this, like, people will know. I even knew back then, I was like, people are going to find out. But then so I had to go back and forth with myself and be like, well, am I going to be okay with myself if I am naked on the internet and people find out? And ultimately I was like, yeah.
What made you feel okay with that?
I was just thinking, I was like, well, why is it a big deal? That's what I felt. I said, why is this such a thing? I really took some reflecting. I was like, who cares if I'm naked?
I imagine in that like doing that, especially live, you're tapped into this like raw sexuality that is so often subdued in real life, from probably like guys that are, just have like normal jobs, normal lives, outside of that. Was it jarring to be like thrust into all of that, like almost like tumultuous sexuality? Like, and how did you respond, and how did that like change your opinion of like society and men and all that stuff?
Well, it made me realize that everyone's a little freaky. Everybody. I don't give a fuck who you are. You got something. It was like being thrown head first, because I didn't know about like any of the fetishes or anything like that. And like, let me tell you, when you're a cam model, you get exposed to all of those. And
quickly.
Oh my God. Like, I can tell you some of them, like probably the first instance that I was like, holy cow, what's happening? I was on cam and this guy wanted a private show, and his fetish was being stuck. And I'm like, hey, what do you mean by being stuck? He's like, well, have you seen the movie Mean Girls? I'm like, well, obviously, it's my favorite movie. He's like, do you know the part where Lindsay Lohan's walking down the hall and all of a sudden she trips and falls in the garbage can head first, and she's flailing her legs about in the air? And I was like, well, yeah. And he's like, that's my thing. Like, and I want you to say, help me, I'm stuck. When they're in that moment, they're ready to go. You better figure it out.
Yeah.
I see my hamper. I'm like, that'll do. This is like off cam. I'm like, just a second. I'm like taking all these dirty clothes out my hamper. I'm like, look what I found. So I go in front of the cam and I just like dove head first into my hamper, kicking my legs up and down. I was like, help me, I'm stuck. And then I would come up for air, because you're upside down.
Yeah.
I was like, is this okay? He's like, yeah, keep going. I dive back in, and I was kicking my legs, and I was like, I did that for like 20 minutes.
Alex was actually having fun making money on My Free Cams. It seems like this could be the opportunity that she was looking for, but she still had the issue of her desk job. She was at a crossroads.
How much do you think entering into that world was because you needed money, and how much was it revisiting those early childhood like passions?
It was both. It was mostly, it was more so like, that's why I considered it, because I knew, I was like, I'm interested in this.
Yeah.
But then the money was like also a bonus, obviously, but that's why the two together, I was like, this seems like a good idea, And so I did, and I remember I was on for like a few hours, and I remember making more in one day than I did in a week. And then I was like, well, okay, I know my
the
answer.
The decision is made.
The way I was raised, it's like, you get a job. And then to say I want to quit my job that I went to school for and be a cam model, like what? So it took a lot on my end.
You're sacrificing like everything that your like life had been built on, almost like the foundation of your life was this structure of going to school, getting a 9-to-5 job.
Yeah.
And I think that transition more than anyone like in your life so far was like the rejection of all of that and the pursuit of that independence.
Yeah.
So like, did you feel that it was that like monumental?
It felt free. I was as soon as I typed in that resignation letter, I was scared shitless too. I was like, I can't believe I'm doing this. And I was like, no, I got to send. And I sent it. And then immediately I felt like this big weight was off my shoulders, and I knew I did the right thing.
This choice to quit her job was a plunge into the unconventional. That job was the last thing tying her to her societal obligations and her traditional life. Porn is stigmatized to the point where if you have a video or picture leaked, you could lose your job, your social standing, your friends, your community. A choice to embrace life in adult entertainment in many ways meant a rejection of that conventional life. Cam modeling was just the start for Alex. She was still curious about that next natural step, porn.
I knew like a lot of the cam models like did girl shows, and they would like it was collaboration, they would get together over a weekend and do these shows. And then I was thinking, well, I'm still curious about doing porn, and I don't know. And obviously I was doing cam modeling, and I saw what it was, and I was like, oh, well, I could definitely do porn now, you know?
Yeah.
It was about that time too where I was getting sick of New York. I was just getting sick of the cold, and I always had LA in my mind, and I had gone there like a year before with my best friend to visit a friend. Fell in love with it. It was great, and I just knew I was like, I'm gonna live here.
Back to the podcast after the break. Viral Academy has helped many students grow their audience and make a living by just doing YouTube. But I wanted to see if any other people knew how to get more followers. So I called up the Catholic Church and asked, how did Jesus get more followers?
Is this Reverend Francisco?
Yes, how can I help you?
How long do you think it took for Jesus to get its first 100,000 followers?
It probably took a little while.
So ballpark, what do you think that would be? 100 years?
Probably, I mean, that sounds like a pretty good number.
So do you think Jesus would have a YouTube channel?
I don't know. I mean, I know he would want, his apostles to use the media. I mean, he would do audio, video,
Oh, so audio, so a SoundCloud rapper?
I just don't think that's the best way.
Luckily, JumpCut does know the best way, and you won't have to wait 100 years to get 100,000 followers like my main man, JC.
With our course, Viral Academy, we can give you a step-by-step A to Z roadmap of how to launch a profitable channel on YouTube. You can finally pursue what you're really passionate about and make a living doing what you love on YouTube. We wanted to give a special incentive to our podcast listeners and offer a free 4-part video training series. So go to jumpcut.com/try now, and we will teach you how to start your channel, how to come up with video ideas, and how to monetize it. Stop pursuing a paycheck and start pursuing a passion. Again, that's jumpcut.com/try now. See you there.
Alix was situated for success. California's San Fernando Valley is responsible for 90% of all legal porn in the States. But deciding on moving to Los Angeles is one thing. Actually following through and finding how to safely navigate this industry is a completely other thing. So she got to work and started where every great research project starts, Google.
I did my research how to do porn. I just Googled it. That's what I do. I Google shit. So I came across some website, and it was saying you make sure that your agency is licensed by this organization. So then I Googled porn agencies Los Angeles, and my agency came up. I'm still with them to this day, OC Modeling. And what drew me to this one, OC, was that the owner was a woman. And I was like, no one's gonna be able to understand being a female better than another female, especially in this industry. And so I had my best friend take some nudes of me, and I sent them in to this agency. I had, again, done my research, and I knew that doing porn, you do things in your career strategically, and you can perform certain things. You can start off girl on girl only. You can do boy girl, and then you can go and do blow job or blow bangs and gang bangs and anal and all that stuff. And it was a tier thing, strategic moves. I was I'll start off just doing girl on girl and get my feet wet. Yeah. So I contacted them, sent my photos. They emailed me back, and they're we'd love to have you come out here. And a few weeks later, I was on a plane by myself going to LA. No idea what to expect. They took me around to all these companies, and I just remember pulling up front to Hustler, and there's a sign, Hustler, parking for Larry Flint. I'm this is such a trip that I'm here,
Alix got her feet wet with some solo scene for a pantyhose fetish company, and then she did some solo scene for Hustler. And all this was a breeze, because it was pretty much the same thing that she had been doing when she was just cam modeling. But then she jumped up a tier and starred in her first scene with another person.
My first ever scene with another person, it was a girl scene with this girl, Jeannie Marie, and it was for Hustler too. I was still nervous as hell.
Why?
It was Hustler, and back then, I know things are kind of different now, but Hustler was a big deal. I grew up, and there was Hustler magazines next to that stack of Playboys, I was this is a big deal. This is dope. But I was still just like nervous. I was like, this is like a girl scene. I don't know what the fuck I'm doing, because like I had like threesomes before, but that was like for fun. It's different
it wasn't on
when
camera.
It's different when you're performing and making a performance for a viewer at home. It's not about you. I mean, it is, but it isn't. It's about the people at home. I was like in trouble for something. She had to like strip search me, and like that
Classic.
was it. It was a cop scene, right? So she had been around for a while, fortunately, and she really she knew it was my first girl scene. She took me under her wing, and she's like, listen, I'm gonna lead this scene. You just kind of like mimic me and let us flow together. It's a lot of mental buildup, but then when we got into it, it was just so easy. We just like let it roll, and we went with it, and it was simple.
This was news to me, but apparently in porn, you don't make that much money. Mia Khalifa, which is arguably one of the most famous and prolific porn stars of ever, made only $12,000 from her porn career. So apparently porn isn't about the money, it's more about the exposure.
You really can't live on just doing porn alone at all.
If you can't live off porn alone, but you can live off webcamming, why did you make that transition?
In the cam world, I was, I had fans, but like in normal life, like people don't know who I am, but like when you do porn, you get more fans that are going to come to your cam shows and spend on you and like buy things from you and join your fan clubs, and so it all comes full circle. So I got a good amount of shoots, and especially as a new girl, you're like fresh meat, so everybody wants to shoot you. But I also knew this going in, that like you don't know when your next shoot is going to be, so you always have to like be doing something else too. You can't just rely on that. Like, don't put all of your eggs into one basket. I've always been that way. So when I wasn't shooting, I was on webcam, and I would build up my following. I mean, I would get more and more people as the scenes would come out. Since day one, I was like, well, yeah, Pornhub has like 80 million views a day. It seems like a no-brainer. I would want to post my videos on there to get more traffic to my stuff. So I made a profile on Pornhub, my model page. I started making videos, posting them on there. I would get more fans. And people see it now, but back then people were like, don't go on Pornhub. It's like, y'all don't get it. Like, you're not going to take Pornhub away. And I understand the animosity towards them, because when they first started, it was stolen content that they were posting that were on there, and now it's a lot more regulated. And you have your channels and you can sell things on there. But God, the amount of traffic that you get is just bananas.
Insane, yeah. Was there a moment that changed things in terms of your popularity? Like, was there like a big break?
I was living at the model house, and above me there was a male performer, Jesse Jones. So he took me under his wing, and then one day he was like, oh, I'm going to a music video shoot that Pornhub is doing. You should go. And so I went, and they needed another girl in the video. I was fresh, and I remember being there with like these girls that had bigger names. Like, I know like Brittany Amber was on there, Maddie O'Reilly was there, and they were pretty established, and I was a little intimidated. I was like, oh my God, like I'm like, these chicks have been around for a while, and like I don't know what the fuck I'm doing, but I went, and I did it. I was in the video, and that day on set, there was a guy there, Matt, and he was overseeing the entire thing. And I sat down with Matt and got to talking to him. He's my manager. He's been my manager since that day. He really helped me figure out how I wanted to brand myself. He's like, how can we get you attention? And he's like, well, I know someone who works at Cosmo, who writes for Cosmo, and I think it would be cool to like do a story on you, because my background's like different. I have a master's degree. I worked in corporate life. What happened is I got an interview with Cosmo, and it was basically like how I gave up my life to come out and do porn, and it blew up. I didn't know it. He didn't know it. The story ended up getting picked up by every publication. It was all over. It was great, but it was everywhere.
Yeah.
Like, it was like all these countries. It was being blasted.
Countries?
Yeah, all these
international.
Yeah, it was insane, and it was like so surreal. I was like, this is crazy. My photos are everywhere. Obviously, anyone who didn't know I did porn sure as hell knew then.
The reason Alix has been so successful when other porn stars haven't is because she has control over her brand and image. When she's paid to star in a porn film with other actors, she is actually using that exposure to drive traffic to her personal website and fan pages. This is where she controls the rights to her content and can personally benefit. The Cosmo interview is another example of Alix carefully constructing her image and brand and setting herself up for success. The interview was great for her porn career, but it also demolished the thin barrier between porn life and her regular life. Her family, her friends, everyone would know that she was doing porn, and this could possibly change her relationships and her life.
As people discovered what you did, how did that like change your relationships? I'm sure your family found out at some point.
I knew that eventually like I would need to tell my family. I wrote my dad an email and I told him everything, and he's like, well, I wish you were doing something else, but if you're happy, then I'm happy. I'm glad that you're doing what you want to do. So I felt that from him. I didn't talk to my mom for like 3 or 4 years. I did not talk to her. She did not talk to me. She wanted nothing to do with me. To her,
because of this?
Yeah, to her, it was the worst thing in the world that I could have done. And I just had to accept that. But it's hard for all of us, an adult, because like really, there's not that many parents who are going to be like, yay, you're doing porn. But I also think that's because there's so many misconceptions about the industry out there, and there's just the lack of education and how the industry really is, because you know I've met some of the most wonderful human beings in my life working in porn, and like people are normal.
What do you think those misconceptions are?
That we're just like crazy and that we just want to party and we want to have sex with everybody. And I'm like, you meet me and I'm like the most reserved person. You know, I think there's a time and place for everything. You know, a lot of people that work in porn, like you can't have a really good career and be partying and live this crazy lifestyle. So it's like, it's not
There's
like
discipline that goes into
it's
it, like everything
else. So much
else.
Discipline and so much work, because like I said, you can't just rely on shoots. You have to have other things going on. So you have to plan like cam shows, and you have to, a lot of the girls feature dance. So they'll go to like strip clubs and dance. And it's like, you also have to take care of yourself, because this is your body. And people call porn stars sexual Olympians, and it's very true. It's so true, because if you don't have your stamina, if you're not healthy, you cannot possibly last. You can't give a good scene. You're not going to be able to give it your all. You're not going to have a long career. So a lot of the girls are like vegan. We work out. We like stay hydrated. We go to bed early. So we don't have this like crazy lifestyle that a lot of people think, and we're all like pretty fucking normal.
Porn is one aspect of Alix's life, but she wants to expand her brand and try other things. Alix realizes that there's an expiration date for her time in porn. According to a 2013 study, the average female porn star only lasts 3 years in the industry. And at 30 with 6 years of experience, Alix has kind of extended her stay.
I mean, I just knew going into the business that I couldn't do it forever. I saw people like get out of the business and they're just like, I retired from porn and that's it. I'm forever a porn star. I'm going to go get a regular job. Porn is not going to define me. I'm going to do it. I'm going to have fun, but it's not going to define me. And so I went into that knowing I'm just a woman who does porn, and it's a big part of my life. You can't put me in a box, you know?
Yeah.
I don't retweet my porn. I don't post nudes. If you want nudes, you have to go to my website. So I have pockets, I have containers where you can get those, because I wanted my brand to be about me and about my personality, because I knew that's what was going to carry me. And I also wanted to show people that, like, yeah, you can do porn and you can do sex work, but you're still a human. And I wanted to show, that was always my thing. I wanted to show that to the world.
Looking at the transition that she'll be confronted with, Alix has taken a look at her life and tried to discover where she sources most joy. Yeah, she's had fun doing porn, but there's so much more she wants to do. And her latest interest is music.
Like, I went to my first rave, I think in 2010. It was Deadmau5, and it was in New York City. And I was like, this is somewhere really special. I had always felt like I had spent my entire life just trying to fit into this mold that was made for me. But it wasn't gonna work. It was like putting a square into a circle. And like when I went to my first rave and seeing all these different people like dressing up and just expressing themselves and being like so loving and positive and accepting, and I was like, this is where my heart is. Like, I want to be around these people, and this is my community. And so I took my brother to his first festival when he was 18. It was Electric Zoo, New York. I could see that he loved it as much as I did, and he was making music back then too. He had started producing music when he was like a junior in high school. That after that first festival and seeing the artists up there, I was like, you know, we could do this, right? Like, we can definitely do this. We created Fancy Monster, which is our music group. That's where my heart is. Like, that's where my life is, because I've had so many life-changing moments at these festivals, at these shows. Like, I just want to give back. I want to give these people the experiences that I had.
So how are you transitioning from what you're doing now to like your future in music?
I'm still shooting, and I'm still like, now we're starting to play shows, and it's gonna be just a organic transition. I don't have a set time that I don't want to shoot porn. I mean, even if I'm playing shows, like, I'm still shooting porn. You know, I just take it day by day, but I'm always gonna be involved in porn too, to some extent. And if anything, I just want to be that person who's gonna represent our industry in a positive way to the rest of the world, because that's lacking. We're not like these outcasts, like, we're human. And everybody watches porn. So I think it's so stupid that there's a stigma on it. That's why, again, it's like all laughable. Like sexuality is okay. It's why we're here. Like, we should not be putting such a stigma on it. But it's like, I think people put stigmas on things that they don't really understand. You can do whatever the fuck you want with your life. Like, fuck anybody who tries to put you in a box, you know? Like, I'm like a glitch in the system. Like, yeah, motherfuckers, like, I got my master's degree, I'm doing porn, I'm making music. I mean, sky's the limit. You can literally do that. You can literally do that.
Alix has changed my view on porn. I went into this interview unsure and nervous about an industry that has been continuously scrutinized and stigmatized. But I came out with a humanized and more comprehensive view of the adult entertainment industry. On an economic level, porn is not going away. Adult content is more accessible and popular than ever, with Pornhub alone getting 33.5 billion views in 2018, up 5 billion views from 2017. Those are some huge numbers, and although many porn companies are privately held, which makes it really hard to estimate globally, porn is a $97 billion industry, according to Cassia Wosick, an assistant professor of sociology at New Mexico State University. That's more valuable than the NFL, the NBA, Netflix, and every Hollywood movie. Yeah, all of that combined. On a human level, it's really easy to objectify porn stars and not look below the surface. But listening to Alix, I can understand why she was attracted to the industry. It was a way for her to claim her body, to empower her sexuality, to really be herself. She's becoming a champion of the industry and showing that porn stars and the industry are more three-dimensional than most believe. Alix thinks it's time to forget the stigma and realize that porn, when regulated and done safely, is something universally enjoyed. So maybe it's time to admit that we all recognize Alix, or one of her coworkers, to some extent.